broadcast network, Afterbuzz TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. Afterbuzz TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing after-shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Hello, Masters of Sex fans. Welcome to the Masters of Sex Afterbuzz recap show. This is the season premiere for Season 3, Parliament of Owls. And with me, Adrian Snow.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing tonight? Yes.
I started with Masters of Sex fans. I wonder if they have a certain name. So many of the shows I do here, like the fans have like a particular name.
I don't, I've watched the show from the beginning, and I can't say I've ever heard anyone with a Masters of Sex name.
What?
Sextonian?
Yeah, okay.
Sex,
you know what? If there's one, tell us, and we'll come out and we'll call you that
yes.
from now on. But
right.
Master of Sex back. Very excited to be on this panel this season. And, maybe we should start with a little bit of where we had left off last season.
Yeah, I do say it's very interesting that they always jump so far into the years in between seasons, because it's been, I guess, 4 years since Season 2.
The last episode ended with Kennedy's inauguration, so I guess that's January of 61.
60?
I think the election's 60, so the inauguration
You're right,
61.
inauguration, right.
Exactly. And now we're put into 1965.
Yes.
And it's always a little bit when a show takes a major time jump, and this is, like you said, they jump, but this was the biggest jump
it was a very
of
large
all.
Jump.
And it always takes a minute to kind of get adjusted to this. And this one in particular, seeing the kids so grown.
Right. I was not expecting, I guess, I had kind of forgotten about Henry and Tessa last season, with the exception of just the custody battle that Virginia had at the end. But I never felt like I really saw the kids outside of that. Maybe a few moments with Tessa and her. But Henry, I kind of just hadn't thought about, and I hadn't realized how much older they were going to be. I was like, oh, I thought they were 5 last time we saw them.
Yeah, they're not the adorable little kids that we left off with. They have grown up. But when we start in this episode, we get right into, there had been a lot of resistance, particularly from Bill, about publishing the work and getting the work out there last season. He had sabotaged the whole television thing because he didn't want to put it out there. But when this episode starts, they're about to have a press conference with the release of their book, Human Sexual Response. And they're about to face the press.
Yeah.
So another big jump for Bill. And what's interesting is the episode, the way it's structured, we get to see kind of what got him to the point of being willing to actually go in front of the press.
Yeah, it was nice to kind of see, nice and sad to kind of see him come full circle. You learned so much about Bill's history as a child and his relationship with his brother last season, and the abuse he suffered from his father, which is actually very true from the real Bill Masters. He suffered a lot of abuse from his father. And so to see that reflected in his relationship with Johnny, and how adorable and just wise Johnny was. I was like, oh, this kid is great. But to see him kind of come full circle and to catch himself in that moment where I think even in the previous season he had said something along the lines of refusing to apologize to his father. Yeah. And in turn doing the same thing to Johnny. It was sad, but it was also really great to see him have the realization and to allow that to kind of ignite him to be more open to the book.
Yeah, that he can catch himself, something his father clearly never did.
Yeah.
Look, Bill's never been a great parent. He's never wanted this either. He didn't, even in the early season when they were trying to have kids and stuff, he never really wanted this. And even when they finally had John, he never even wanted to hold him. He was always so awkward.
He just blatantly lied about, Libby's fertility. even though he was the problem. And it was, so it's been fascinating to see him just in this very episode, how far he's come from season 1 to, not wanting a child, to turning on the music and just playing music throughout his son wailing in the background last season.
Yeah.
And all the way to picking up his daughter at the end of the show and carrying her back in.
It's although I'm not ready to give him any Parent of the Year.
I'm saying I'm giving him a little bit of credit for kind of being able to acknowledge like his own issues. It doesn't seem like this is a man who's unaware of the fact that he's not a good parent. He's not blind to that. So it's just been fascinating to see that growth. And also his relationship with Virginia as well has changed a lot.
What I've always loved about the character is here's a man who is supposed to be the expert on sex and sexuality and stuff. And he's never even been comfortable with any of it. He doesn't want to talk to Tessa about it. He doesn't want to. I mean, he still won't even share a bed with his wife.
Yeah.
He's a little more comfortable with Virginia, as we see in the opening scene, but he's still. And I don't know how much of that is still his lingering views on his own sexual feelings, or how much of it is just how cooled he has become about the relationship with his wife, which is basically no relationship at all.
Well, it never seemed like the relationship was really passionate to begin with.
They always had separate beds.
They always had separate beds. They pushed the beds together to have sex. And whenever they did have sex scenes, it was like him staring off into space and her kind of looking down. And it's, even with Virginia, when they have sex, it's kind of become clinical in a way, especially for Virginia, who in like the very first episode, I recall her, going down on, what is his name?
Ethan.
Yeah, Ethan.
Ethan Haas,
Thank you.
yes.
Going down on Ethan and like being really sexually open and fluid, and that opening shot between her and Beau, it's like a clinical thing of like them discussing the press conference and her not being able to sleep, so she just like riles him up to have sex. It's fascinating.
Although we do come to find out she's got some other things on her mind that we get to at the end of the episode.
She's got a few things, just a touch, but it's like how they've gone about, how they talk about sex with each other, even when they kind of have that little S&M episode last season.
Yes.
Where it was like, touch yourself this way and all that kind of stuff. It has become very clinical, and that has been definitely affected by the research that they've been doing. So maybe this year they'll get back to a little bit of the motion. Even with the setup of the lab in their office now, it looks like a bedroom or like a hotel room. So it's nice to see that kind of change from the clinical coldness.
Well, it's interesting, and you mentioned that Bill and Virginia's relationship. I mean, at the beginning of this episode, while they're watching this couple who are clearly going with impotence issues that Bill had, that he's very familiar with. They're doing the sexual touching instead of actually having sex. They've clearly changed not only their practice a lot, like you said, they had the bedroom. They clearly have been helping people. We find out just kind of in a quick throwaway line, Lester has kids now.
Married with kids.
So clearly he got through his issues. They helped him. But the way they talk to each other, I mean, it's like they're not even hiding it anymore around there. They're talking about like, oh, we're all going to the lake together, and she knows like, oh, he likes oatmeal right now. He's been eating a lot of oatmeal, like things like that. And their demeanor is so much like a couple as they're heading up there to the lake with the book. And if you didn't know any better, you might think going into the beginning of this episode, oh, these two are together now and Libby's out of the picture.
That's what I thought. And then I kept looking at their hands, and I kept seeing that Bill was wearing a wedding ring and Virginia was not. And I was like, I'm kind of confused. And then when Libby came out and kissed him on the lips, I was like, oh, like, they are like kind of cohabiting, kind of polyamory.
Yeah, they've got,
got a little interesting flow going on there.
What's interesting about it is, because we know Libby knows.
Yes.
And Bill has just got to be in denial about Libby knowing, but they are this one weird family.
Yeah.
I don't even want to say. Well, it is weird because there are too many secrets and lies still going on between all of them.
I'm curious to see if this season, if they are going to play up the whole type of secrets and lies, because at the end, just to touch on that, when Libby just admits to Virginia, like, I've always wondered what it's like to be with you, after she kisses her on the lips. It's that does not seem to me, at least between Libby and Virginia, if there's any real secrets. I'm sure they don't blatantly discuss things, but they seem to have a very keen awareness of like what the other does and does not know. And just even her pleading about, I don't want my children to suffer like your children have suffered.
And I feel like that scene, I mean, obviously it's the first time we see this, and I'm going to assume because of that, they haven't had a conversation like that in the 4 years, that it's the first real acknowledgement of...
Do you think so?
I think so, because it's such an important moment between those two characters where she's kind of calling Virginia out on her having this affair, but I feel like they both knew the other one knew, and I think this is the first time it was being verbalized. But they always knew.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of hinted at it, or Libby hinted at it to Virginia, excuse me, last season. But I don't know, I got the feeling that within those 4 years, it was just kind of like this agreement that they came upon where they could acknowledge it, because they have been since season 1 kind of very close, strangely close for two women who didn't really know each other that well to begin with. So to see them get to that point where she can crawl into bed with her and talk about it, I don't know. I feel like it's been kind of touched upon before. Maybe Libby's never been so direct about it.
Yes, it's definitely that, because you could see the look on Virginia's face. She's a little taken aback with, I think, how direct she's being about this. Basically, you have this affair going on with my husband. I'm aware of this. We're all could be happy together, but don't take him away. Don't take the family break up the family unit. And you mentioned that also it's about the whole family. She's like raising Virginia's kids in a way too. She's the aunt. She's Aunt Libby now.
That's so crazy.
She drove Tessa up there, and she knows what Henry's doing and everything.
Well, I thought it was really interesting at the beginning of the episode, because you see them in their separate hotel rooms, or you see them together in Virginia's hotel room, and then Bill goes off to his hotel room and makes it look like he's been sleeping in there. And it kind of made me think, well, if George has Henry and Tessa, and Libby takes care of Johnny and Howie and Jenny, like, how much time do Virginia and Bill spend with their respective families? If it's gotten to a point where George tells Libby, I'm not going to come up, or I'm going to be up late, or he's talking to Libby as if she is a co-parent as well, then it's almost as if Virginia and Bill, it's like they're all married, like George. It's it's just kind of fascinating to watch this dynamic happen, because going off of season 1, never would you think that Libby would be okay with this, and that even Bill would be okay with it.
Well, Libby, you talked about Bill evolving, and I think there's no character who has evolved more in 3 seasons of television that I've seen than Libby Masters. Because when the first season started, I got to admit, I wasn't a fan of the character, and had nothing to do with the performance. It was more like she was this very, she was the prototypical 50s housewife, and she even called him, daddy and stuff, which was just odd. And it was it made me start to not really like her. But then, as she's starting to become a little more authoritative, and then last season, having that big kind of a sexual awakening. Basically, she had good sex for the first time.
I was really fascinated by what they did with Libby last season, because I definitely didn't like Libby. Especially when she washed that black girl's hair. I was very angry. But to see them jump from that to her having an affair with the girl's brother, it was fascinating to kind of watch all of that go down, and to see her kind of have good sex for the first time. And you don't see that on TV a lot. No. Women having really good sex.
No, and and you hadn't seen it from that character, and now, and there is. not just, well, I mean, we're all kind of skipping around anyway.
Yeah.
She has that breakdown.
Yeah.
And then she starts, since we're talking about her affair, she has that breakdown, and then she starts talking a lot about civil rights and the civil rights movement, which was kind of the ongoing thing in history that had the specter over all of last season, kind of in the background when they moved to the black hospital, and then her affair and getting involved in the civil rights movement. So she's so concerned about the people. Do you think that's to signify that this affair is still ongoing? Do you think Robert, who she had the affair with, they're still together and she's worried for him?
I think Robert is dead. Like, that was the feeling I got, because it seemed like the way she was acting, it seemed like someone who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
And just like the way she reacted to Henry, like he could have died, that it was so strong that I was like, oh, I think Robert died.
That's a good prediction.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And that would explain, why she's more of the reasons why she's self-medicating. She had this one good thing in her life. This man who kind of made her happy, did what Bill couldn't. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, that was just kind of the feeling I got, and especially, it seems incredibly overwhelming to kind of be raising 3 children under the age of 12 essentially by yourself. And so that, on top of the fact that the man that she was having an affair with, I don't know if they were really in love.
Or at the very least, I can't imagine the affair's ongoing, because I mean that's a long time for her to be keeping. I mean, I guess they can. I mean, but Bill and Virginia they work together, which is, I mean, when they're having the affair, that's research.
Yes.
So
research,
which he was in denial about for the longest time too. And I feel like, do you think he's fully accepted that it's more than just? I mean, right now they fully accepted that they have a relationship and it's not a working relationship.
I don't think they do, because Bill didn't attempt to go to Virginia's room during the lake, and he could have definitely done that, snuck in, later in the night and then snuck out in the morning. I don't really, and even how they talk about things when they are having sex, it comes down to that kind of clinical way. It just doesn't seem like these are two people who have really accepted the fact that they're in an affair. Even with Virginia, in the conversation she has with Libby at the end, it's not like this is a mistress talking to a wife. It's like a friend / coworker of a husband talking to the wife.
Well, Bill also, to the point of the hotels, Bill does have to still be in complete denial about Libby knowing, because otherwise why get 2 hotel rooms? Why keep up the...
Well, that's also, I think,
or maybe just
for the professional
public,
aspect, the public aspect. They don't want people assuming that they are 2 sex researchers having sex with each other, even though that's completely true.
The other thing that Virginia is dealing with in this episode is that she wants to go back to school, because she knows if she doesn't get her degree, all those critics that we keep seeing when they keep cutting the 4 months forward to that press conference are going to eat her alive, basically, that she doesn't have the credentials. And it does happen to a point, but we find out he did let her go back to school, which, which, I mean, let her,
It's an interesting commentary about the Bill that they portray in the show. I know that he was a forward thinker, but maybe not as quite a forward thinker as they make him in the show. But even the conversation that they have in the car, he says, I might have kind of try to shy you away from going back to school, but at no point did I ever stop you from going back to school. The only reason you haven't gone back is because of you. Yeah. They have some interesting commentaries going on with that, just in terms of some of the lines that Virginia is saying during the press conference in terms of feminist commentary, or even they kind of lightly brushed upon the whole idea of rape culture.
Yes.
Of just like, do you think a woman can say no? And Virginia's response was very much a response to the whole thought of like, that a woman is kind of a property of a man, even though the woman did go back and correct her and say, no, I just meant in terms of like basically being slut shamed if you do have sex openly.
And the other reporters basically are insinuating like, well, if you remove any of this social fear about sex, like, as if it's going to then be a free-for-all, and people are going to feel like they can't. And she has the line, she says that they do not believe the removal of fear oh my God, I can't read my own notes.
Oh, no.
The removal of fear is the destruction of values.
Yes.
Or whatever. So,
which is
I've noted myself to death here.
No. Hearing about it now, especially just living in present time and hearing about how we discuss sex from people who are essentially descendants of Puritans, it's still very much like the same type of conversation. Yes. And to hear the things that she's having to defend, like even having to defend her right to be there, or even when they're in the car and she says, Darwin is not going to have it as hard as I have it, half as hard as I have it when we do this press conference. So they touch on a lot of things in that way that you just didn't assume like those were the type of conversations people were having. Like, yes, it's a very forward thing to do to have a human sexual response, a book on human sexual response. But it's also interesting to see how it still kind of mirrors today, that we're still having those same conversations.
Yeah, no, I mean, sex is more of a thing that's out there now. I mean, look, we just watched a show where we're actually watching people have sex on TV.
Yeah.
But we still get tied up in a lot of these puritanical things and conversations and fears about sex that they were trying to make us feel better about in the 60s.
Yeah.
So progress takes a while.
Well, it's something that also Bill said towards the end of that particular scene. He said something along the lines of, you do not need fear. Like, this is not something that's new. This is a part of who we are.
Yes.
Before the Industrial Revolution, a woman would go out to feed her husband in the farm, and they would have sex under the tree. You couldn't say that, but I can. Have sex under the tree. And so that's just a returning to who we are, and the true thing that you need in a sexual relationship is the truth and trust.
And I think that speech he gave at the end was really great, because I think it sums up a lot of, early on, Virginia says, like, we are the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
It's because we're people like us who are doing this research, we're ushering in the sexual revolution. And I think that kind of also summed up a lot of those ideas that I'm assuming in the season, as we get into the late 60s, we're really going to be seeing pushed more forward and forward. But back up at the lake, Bill, when they do arrive, there's this great chaotic scene that I loved when he goes in and the kids are fighting, and he wants to, again, just deal with his book, proof the book that they're gonna publish. He won't get into any family stuff. He kicks the kids out. I mean, immediately it's that kind of demonstrative dad that, we're worried that he's going to become. Yeah. And he makes the kids go outside, and he's fighting with Virginia, and he's complaining about the room because Tessa had already called the room that he was in, because you can't have like 15-year-old girl and 17-year-old brother sister sharing rooms at this point.
They don't like that. Well, it speaks a lot to talking the talk but not walking the walk.
Yes.
And I will say this even for myself. I like to think of myself as a feminist and all about human rights and women's rights. But even I will do stuff where I'm like, oh, that is archaic. Yeah. Like, I've kind of given into the society that I live in. Yeah. And that's kind of just, it's fascinating to see them, how they interact with their own families based off what they know culturally, even as they try to fight it in their work. That's
a great way to explain it. Yeah, he's having trouble shedding those puritanical things. Yeah. Because you're absolutely right. There are things that we do or say that we don't even think about, that just because it's been ingrained, and we don't necessarily even mean anything bad about it or use against. Yeah. And that's a great example for some of these characters in the 60s there. So the other thing we find out, Henry does make it up to the cabin.
Oh, God, Henry.
And there's a great scene, which, again, also was the thing that made me really mess with my head with the time jump. Like, oh, my God. Because Virginia walks in on her son Henry having sex with some woman from up by the lake. Yeah. And there's this really great comical moment where she leaves the room, and then she's heavily stomping like that. Oh, I'm here. I'm here. Is anyone here?
Well, that's very nice of her, honestly. I don't know if most parents would let him try to finish. Speaks to her being a sex researcher. I thought that was really a great play against the conversation she was having earlier with Libby and Bill about talking to Tessa about sex, because it kind of spoke to that kind of archaic viewpoint of like a woman needs to have a talking to about sex, the dangers of pregnancy, the dangers of venereal disease. But nobody talked to Henry about it. Henry just banging a chick left and right before they even get to the house. So even that was kind of like, oh, that's really funny that Tessa, who
she needs to talk.
She does need a talk. She does need a talk. But, you know, Henry probably needs to talk too.
Needs to talk too. Well, throughout this episode, the Henry character, and you know, we should say at the end of the episode there was kind of a disclaimer about how the kids, although Masters and Johnson are like, it's paralleling things that really happened in their life, the kids are fictitious.
Yes.
And I mean, I know they both had kids before they met, but I assume that they've now taken a lot of liberties, particularly to address certain issues of the day, including Vietnam, which is clearly, if civil rights had a big specter over the last season, this season it's going to be Vietnam.
Yes.
You hear them talk about it on the radio, and then what we find out later when Virginia and Henry get into a fight, and he does that driver. They called him an asshole. He was not an asshole.
No.
Henry stepped out into the middle of traffic, not looking.
And I knew they were going to do that. I'm like, oh, he's going to get hit by a car.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he keeps turning his back to the street. So to have him, you were going to say.
Then when he's at the hospital, there was an army recruiter there who he had business with in town that day.
Yeah.
And it turns out he had talked to this guy the year before, and he is planning on joining the army. And, you know, Vietnam is just really getting underway in a big way at this point. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do with that. It is a very different it is very different. It's a fictitious storyline of their children. But it is something to bring in, along with the fact that they are entering or have already, they're entering the sexual revolution. So at the same time, how those things play out in terms of their personal lives and their work lives will be interesting to see. It'll be great to see the juxtaposition of the two generations, too, because here, like you said, we have these two people who are more sexually progressive than most people, most kids' parents in the 60s, but they are clearly going to be some things that the children do that Virginia's not going to be thrilled with. I never expected. They kind of hinted at it a little bit this episode. But I just didn't really expect Tessa to throw herself at Bill. There was a moment in the car when she was like, "Oh, you think I'm an adult?" Yeah, that's kind of like where I was like, "Uh-oh." But he diffused it enough, and that scene ended on like a light enough note that I'm like, "Oh, she's not." I didn't expect her to actually make a move on him. Yeah. Granted, she was drunk. Hammered at the time. Yeah. It's just funny because it's like he does, for someone who is a sex researcher, he comes off as so sexless. And I'm not speaking to Michael Sheen. I think Michael Sheen is a very attractive man. I'm just talking about his character. Yes. But it is kind of like, you just said that he was the last person on earth that you would ever want to have a sex talk with, and you just like grabbed this man. So I don't know why they played that up. I'm curious as to if they're going to do more with that. I hope not. Well, is it? I mean, I don't know enough about Tessa at this point. Could it have been? Was it just that he was there? Or do you think it comes from this whole thing where, clearly they've had an on-again, off-again close relationship with their father. George is around, then he's not around, then he has custody, then he's clearly with his marriage dissolving. So do you think there's also father issues that she's playing out with Bill in some creepy way? I don't know. Maybe in the past, George did say that he had been taking care of the children, had full custody for the past 4 years. Yeah. And he only recently gone through a divorce. So it might be playing into the fact that her father is also dating an 18-year-old. That's true. So they kind of just threw that in there randomly. But the relationships that the kids are having are interesting because Henry is dating an older woman. Yeah. And so I don't know if that plays into Tessa's mindset and her desire to be seen as an adult woman, even from taking a drag of her mother's cigarette, pouring the drink. Yeah. But she's got that teenage, it's almost, It's almost too on the nose, like when
Yeah.
they're playing the board game Life, and she's like, "I hate life," It's like so. It's a little.
Yeah.
There were a few things in this episode that I thought were a little on the nose, but I also think that was trying to readjust us to the time jump and get us back into the season and check where everybody's at.
Yeah.
But what's great about the scene with Tessa when she goes to kiss Bill, and I'm with you, I hope that isn't like an ongoing thing.
Too many shows have been trying to get me to like be okay with older men having romantic relationships with 15-year-olds, and I'm like, you need to stop. Like, I am not okay with this.
What are the shows?
The Americans.
Oh, I don't watch The Americans.
Well,
I know I'd like it. But.
No, the husband in that show, he was tasked with seducing like a 15-year-old.
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, I just can't. I can't do this. Please don't do this. And they didn't really go. They kind of like stopped it and just made it disappear. But stop it.
But the great thing about that scene is that Johnny walks in on it.
Yeah.
He sees her topless, kissing him. Bill's pushing her away.
Yeah.
But he sees this go down, and he runs off. And I think it's only natural that Bill's like, I have to explain this to my child. But Johnny doesn't want to hear any of it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to deal it, and he has a great moment where he calls Bill out on his BS, where he calls him a freak, amongst some other things.
Yeah, you never kiss mom.
Yeah.
And other stuff.
Yeah, so it's interesting that the kid, I don't know how old he's supposed to be at this point.
12, because he was, or 12 or 11, because he was born at the end of season 1.
Okay, so
over that course of time, so like 11.
So his whole, the way his views on relationships and women and things like that have all been sculpted by the way his mother and father have been, which is basically they're not affectionate at all. Yeah. He's clearly closer to the mother, but he's clearly trying to be close to the father. He has the little moments where, like, his father's not playing life, he's not playing life. Oh, should we have dinner now? Are we going to eat dinner together? Yeah. Like, no, we need to the whole like God forbid he has dinner with his son. And it kind of all comes out in this moment.
Yeah.
And that's when we were talking about the great moment you were talking about, where he goes down on the dock and Johnny takes the book. He takes this book that he's been working on all week, and I knew something terrible was going to happen to that book.
That was beautiful, though.
Because from the moment he's like, oh, be careful with it. Like, there are so many moments. You don't have that many moments in an episode of be careful with that thing without that thing getting destroyed by the end of it.
It's like the gun in a play.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it is a great moment where he just throws the book up and it goes off into the lake.
Yeah, I thought it was really nice. I know personally I don't have a lot of experience with kids, but you forget, like, how wise kids can be and how observant they are, especially, and how they kind of take after their parents and just the moments that they had leading up to that, of like when he drops off the coffee for his dad, and you can tell he like wants to just talk to his dad. He just wants him to explain, like, what is the human sexual response, and maybe he is a little too young to have that conversation, but maybe he isn't a little, too young to have like some type of conversation along those lines. And so to have those moments build up and to do it so effectively for the first episode, to not have it something where they had to show his relationship with Johnny over the course of all time, you kind of just get the feeling that they aren't very close.
He's definitely, though, his father's son.
Yeah.
He is definitely his father's son, and Bill is struggling with the idea of becoming his own father.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned wise, and the episode's called Parliament of Owls. Owls, very wise animal, which apparently they call it a parliament of owls when there are multiple owls because they're wise animals. And I guess in theory, Parliament's wise.
Yes.
But they're also solitary creatures, and we see Bill trying to be that solitary creature, and we see his son is a little bit that way, taking after his father. But at the end of this episode, and I don't necessarily think it's going to work, but he's trying to bring the family together, and the way he does it is he tells Libby, we're going to get more galleys of the book, and I want you to read it. Which is the first time we've really seen him let her in on what they're doing in the research and stuff like that.
Yeah. He's kind of maybe hinted about it in the past, but he's never really directly spoken to Libby about it. I think she even wanted to participate in the research.
Yeah, at one point.
And he refused. So it's nice to see him have that change, and to really have that that response to Johnny when he says, I'll never apologize to you. It's just, that's such a bold thing to say to your parent,
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, especially from the revelation we have at the end, the very, very end.
Yes.
Of Virginia.
Very end of the episode. And it's one of those things, it's one of those moments that there are little clues throughout the way she's talks about eating and her going to the bathroom and her dress isn't all zipped up, and the way she reacts to when the woman brings up pregnancy as being the woman from Ladies Home Journal brings up pregnancy as being like the ultimate thing you might be trying to avoid with sex. And Bill puts it all together and at the end basically calls her out like, you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, there's just no way that that Libby's gonna get what she wants.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I want to know what they're gonna do with it, because they are very open to talking about abortion on the show.
Yeah,
and I don't know if they had a kid together in real life.
Yeah, that fact, I mean, I know they all had children separately. I imagine maybe they did, though.
I don't think they did. I mean, I don't want to... I know what eventually happened to the relationship,
yes,
so I'm not going to spoil it.
That's pretty much what I know. Yeah, I don't know whether that's something we're supposed to, although it's one of those things that, history, well...
But I don't think they had children together. So, and... I don't know how old Virginia is at this time, so it'll be interesting to see how they touch back on reproduction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question is, you're right. Do they end up having this baby? Will there be an abortion story? Will there be? I mean, she could have a miscarriage. I mean, a lot of things could happen.
Abortion is also still illegal, which they kind of touched on first season. They touched on. He gave someone.
Yes.
He tied someone's tubes after she was in an abusive relationship. But yeah.
That's something interesting that I wonder if they were going to try to take on in some way this season. Mm-hmm. We were talking about how that's going to play out, and clearly the jig's going to be up with at that point. You can't hide that, and Libby's going to know. You can't hide that forever.
No.
So yeah, and I mean, look, Virginia's still having her own problems with her kids, like we said. There was one scene trying to talk about some other characters who we don't see all that much of in this episode. There's a scene with George, who he is equally worried about Henry going to Vietnam.
Yeah.
I keep almost saying Johnny Henry.
Yeah.
All their kids' names end in what? Johnny, Jenny, Henry,
Howie.
Yeah. So. He's very concerned about that, and I'm wondering how much we'll see of him this season.
Yeah.
We only have a little bit of Betty at the beginning running the office there, but
with her new '60s hairdo and everything. I was like, oh yeah.
She's always been the most
fashion forward.
Exactly, of all the characters.
No, yeah. So I think especially once they get back in the office, it'll be interesting to see how the dynamics really work outside of their vacation time together. Henry, I'm not sure what they're going to do with him. If I would hate for the season to end with Henry dying, I think that'd be. Sorry, I jumped way forward.
But you know what? Much like, you said the Chekhov's gun thing, I feel like if you send a character to Vietnam and then you also specifically tell us what happens to the kids on this show isn't what happened to their kids in reality, it makes me think,
they're gonna
kill him.
Yeah.
Or something could happen to him. I mean, you send a character to Vietnam, well, I guess that's not always the case. I think Mad Men sent some people to Vietnam and they didn't die. They sent Joan's husband. He didn't die on that show.
He's a doctor.
Yeah.
So he wasn't out he wasn't fighting per se. Yeah, and we'll see what they do with that and how they touch on his storyline as well.
Well, talking about seeing what we're going to see in the future, do we want to talk about some predictions for what we're going to be getting?
Yeah.
And now, your Afterbuzz TV Predictions.
Well, because it is a show about real people, sometimes predictions, I'd imagine on this show, are interesting about their relationship, where things are going to go. But what do you have any thoughts of what we might be seeing either in the next episode or this season?
I think I don't want to really comment on next episode. I mean, there is obviously going to be a response to Virginia being pregnant. Overall, I think there's going to be a big divide between the families. I think there's a reason why they showed us with the family all together and how far they've come, because all of that's just going to, explode throughout the season, and just with her being pregnant. And I think eventually it'll come out that Libby did have an affair. And, I'm curious about Henry's girlfriend and the fact that she has a baby, not a kid, but a baby, and that he was there last summer. So we'll see.
Oh, that's true. Oh, so is he I didn't even, for some reason, I didn't think about that. Although that seems like an obvious thing.
Yeah.
That's a good catch. I guess the season as a whole is going to deal a lot now with not just their relationships, but they're going to have to deal with fame. Also this season, they're going to have to deal with, now we're past this press conference. The book's going to come out, and the world's going to be talking about them. And how do you continue doing this research with all that fame? How do you, now reporters and stuff are probably going to look into a little bit more about Masters and Johnson and find out, maybe they find out, these researchers have been having an affair. Maybe stuff gets out that way. I don't know.
Maybe, but it's a different time. I think we've kind of gotten used to people's lives being invaded the moment they get fame.
There's no TMZ in
paparazzi
1965.
Isn't quite there yet.
Yeah. Okay, so they could.
We'll see, though. We'll see.
Another thing, it was like another little throwaway line, but I feel like nothing's a throwaway line. Virginia talks about her parents moving to St. Louis.
Oh, God, yeah.
So, and it's like this kind of out of nowhere little discussion, which makes me, again, assume we're going to meet Virginia's parents this season. We've seen Bill's family in the past. Now, getting to Virginia's family a little bit more would be interesting to see, and the relationship they have with her parents might have with the grandkids.
Yeah.
Tessa's clearly there's going to be a big push-pull between Tessa and Virginia this season. I wonder if she ever, like I said, I hope Tessa doesn't pursue what she was pursuing this episode more, but I wonder if Virginia even ever finds out about that. I wonder if even Tessa remembers doing it, quite frankly, because she was pretty drunk.
Yeah, she was really
at the time. A lot of people self-medicating. Tessa's drinking heavily. Libby
taking
popping pills. Yeah,
it's a sign of the times. I mean, it's still kind of a sign of the times, but
that's what the people are doing.
Right.
There you go. So I guess that's our first episode.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Before we go, why don't you tell the people, I guess,
where they can
find you, or is there any other shows?
I'm not doing any other shows currently, but you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Miss Adrian Snow. That's MSADRIANSNOW.
Excellent. And you can follow me on Twitter at The Real Will Link. And you can also listen to, I do a pop culture comedy podcast with my friend Sean. It's called Will Sean Podcast. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. But listen to it. You'll love it. It's funny. We talk pop culture. So give that a listen to on iTunes. So until next week, thank you for listening, and we will see you then.
Yep.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Afterbuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the Afterbuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterbuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of Afterbuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.